All right, guys. Today we're going to be reacting to which German political parties will U.S. politicians belong to. Thank you so much for the support. This is one of those very good videos that some of you guys recommended. We're just going to simply jump in. Make sure you like to subscribe. We're heading to 2,000 subscribers. Jump in.
Which German political party I think that would be a good fit for them. And I want to do this because I want to not only show American and US audience where the kind of German political parties are policy-wise in comparison to our politicians, but also for German audience, people who watch this from Germany, they can kind of see which politicians we have, where they are in comparison to some of the German parties, of course, because we only have two, so it's very hard to understand the differences in our politicians unless you look at it on a case-by-case basis, and that's what I want to do. So I have about 30, I think 37 well-known U.S. senators, ex-presidents, governors, and I want to take them and distribute them amongst the main 6 political parties we have in Germany. So if you're new to this channel, welcome. Of course, I am an American. I am currently an intern in the German Bundestag. The purpose of this channel will be to cover German politics from an American perspective and for an American audience. I will be covering European politics in general, but mainly focusing on Germany. So let's get started. And at the front of the list, we have, of course, Trump and Biden. Donald Trump is going to go easily in the AfD. I mean, he was this kind of right-wing populist president. He brought a lot of new ideas and change to the Republicans, a new vision. He focused a lot on immigration, foreign policy, trade, had this, kind of patriotic, nationalistic, a flair to him, a more populist agenda. And he also came around at the same time that the AfD was kind of ascending to popularity in Germany. And so he's going to be a good fit there. Joe Biden, I'm going to put in the SPD. I mean, there are arguments that you could say Joe Biden could be in maybe the FDP, but I would say a big part of it is not only policy but identity. And I think Joe Biden, being the vice president from Obama, he fits pretty well in the SPD as kind of an establishment, generic Democrat. I think that's a good fit for him. Rubio is kind of establishment, generic Republican. You can make the argument for CDU, but I'm going to put him in the FDP because he isn't as focused on, he doesn't have the same kind of conservative personality that some of the Deep South Republicans do. He is kind of a liberal on some issues. He's been more liberal, I believe, on immigration in the past, and that fits kind of well with the FDP, but you can also make an argument for CDU. Al Gore, this is going to be a pretty easy one. The Greens. Al Gore was, of course, more of an establishment, traditional Democrat, but when he ran for president in 2000, a big focus of his campaign was on the environment and climate change. That was a huge part of his identity, and he was able to kind of make a name for himself on that, not only during his presidential campaign, but also just as a political activist focused on the environment. So he's going to go in the Greens. Bernie Sanders is going to go in Die Linke. That's a good fit for him. Now, of course, Die Linke as a political party in Germany is a lot more left-wing than Bernie Sanders is.
Really? Bernie Sanders lefty. Bernie Sanders a real lefty. I mean, I would say Bernie Sanders is lefty as close to a communist. He is very communist. He's communist. I'll say it. He's a communist guy. So you guys have a very lefty. You're lefty. I mean, y'all communists in that party. But Bernie Sanders communist.
Is that the political parties in Germany are not going to align perfectly with the political
That makes sense.
of the U.S. And so when I put Bernie Sanders in Die Linke, I'm not saying that Bernie Sanders has the same exact ideas as Die Linke, but they are in the same position. Die Linke is the most left-wing party in the political kind of scene, the political class, if you say, like it's a relevant party in the German Bundestag, and Bernie Sanders is probably the most left-wing senator that we have.
Interesting.
And for that reason, even if they don't agree on the same exact policies, position-wise and placement-wise, they're in the same, they take up the same space in politics in the two different countries. So I think Bernie Sanders, good fit for the left party. Bill Clinton. Now, Bill Clinton, of course, is another Democrat president. He could fit in kind of any of the more center-left parties. But I'm going to put him in the FDP because I think he's a good fit there. He was able to get NAFTA passed, even though it was kind of a Republican proposal, and I think that's going to make him a good fit. He was still, of course, liberal, maybe not as left-wing and progressive as the Greens would be, but he was still liberal, and then economically kind of aligned with the
Bro, he was more. Based on today's standard, he's way more conservative than the current Democratic Party. So that's a good point.
Republicans on some issues, on neoliberal, on trade. So I think if FDP would be a good fit for him.
Good point.
Chuck Schumer is going to go with Joe Biden in the SPD. Chuck Schumer, of course, being from New York, traditional Democrat, also more working class. This old FDR coalition state, that is
Really?
kind of a good fit for him. Even if he's not the most left-wing person, he is kind of
He's
the
very
establishment
lefty.
generic Democrat, and that's a good fit. Obama is also going to go in the SPD. Obama is very similar to Gerhard Schröder, who was chancellor from 1998 to 2005. He presented this kind of new progressive vision within the center-left, within the SPD in Germany, and he's a lot of similarities in his personality and his politics to Obama.
I would say Obama's might be between Linke and SPD, right here in the middle. Right here, but you can't do it, right?
He kind of came along as this new, not necessarily younger in Schröder's case, but this prevented this kind of new vision for the country and a vision of change. But it wasn't too progressive. It was a lot of focus on socioeconomic issues, especially helping the former East Germany. At least that was kind of a lot of his appeal, just like Obama kind of appealed to white working class and minority voters in parts of the the Rust Belt. So SPD is a good fit for him. Brian Kemp, we have kind of establishment Republican, especially from the South. He's going to be a good fit. Very Christian conservative part of the country. He doesn't stand out too much.
He's sitting in the back door kind of thing.
And so CDU is a good fit for him.
Good point.
Jill Stein. Now this one's actually kind of interesting. Now Jill Stein, of course, is a Green Party politician. You could easily make the argument that Jill Stein would go in the Greens. However, the Greens in the U.S. are a lot more left-wing than the Greens in Germany. And when you actually look at policy-wise, Jill Stein would actually go with Die Linke based on foreign policy, based on economics. That's a more fit for the party. And that's one of those things where you could also say, you could put her in the Greens just on the fact that it's the same color, same party. But if you look at policy, I think she'd be better fit. But, you can make an argument for both. AOC is also going to go in Die Linke. She kind of came with the same profile as Bernie Sanders. It's like young, left-wing populist. Young in her case as compared to Sanders, but she kind of was a protege of him, big supporter. They, I believe, supported each other. And she kind of was this new brand, this new kind of wing of the Democratic Congressional Caucus. And her, and along with all the squad members, we have Ilhan Omar, which we might as well put here as well.
Yep, all in the same.
Left-wing populists on economics. Like I said, you can make the argument maybe they're not as left-wing as Die Linke would be in Germany. But
she's lefty. No. She's more lefty than Bernie Sanders. All these three females are more lefty than Bernie Sanders. Oh, yeah.
Up the furthest left bloc within the Congress. And, on foreign policy issues, they agree a lot with Die Linke.
Yep.
Beto O'Rourke, I'm going to put him in the Greens. He, of course, fits well with the Greens. He's a traditional Democrat in some ways, but he also focuses on social issues a lot, things like abortion. He's a very progressive person, young candidate, and that is kind of the same the same kind of personality that the Greens have, especially in Germany. And Greens have a lot of personalities like this, especially in conservative parts of Germany, where they have Green candidates that focus on social liberal issues to appeal to the more middle class as compared to the SPD that appeals to a kind of working class in the traditional larger cities. So Beto O'Rourke, I think, a good fit there. George Bush is going to go CDU. I mean, establishment, kind of generic, this conservative figure, well-known. He's Atlanticist and kind of very pro-American, pro-NATO in terms of foreign policy, led the Iraq War, things that the CDU were kind of very supportive of. So very good fit there. Susan Collins, a liberal Republican, is going to fit perfectly in the FDP. I mean, that's essentially what the FDP is. They are liberal on social issues, a lot more moderate on the cultural
but conservative
scene.
Economically.
But on economics, they are very pro-free market, very liberal in the European sense, and that would be a good fit for her. Mitt Romney. Now, Romney, you could make the same argument. You could fit Romney in the FDP. However, Romney has the whole...
No. Romney is a liberal, liberally, socially liberal and economically conservative. He's
being from, he's not from Utah, but he's Utah politician, being a Mormon. He has that kind of distinct, Christian conservative profile. And like I said, you can make the argument for FDP based on some of his policies, but I
Yeah.
think based on his identity, he was also the Republican nominee. I think he would fit pretty well
Fair,
in
fair,
the
fair.
CDU. You could make maybe the more liberal wing of the CDU, but nonetheless a good fit for him. Jim Jordan is going to go in the AFD with Donald Trump. He definitely is a more right-wing leaning member of the Republican Congressional Caucus, member of the Freedom Caucus, and
Now, remember, the AFD has more like the racial aspect. There's a lot of racial aspect when it comes down to German politics. But in the United States, not very similar, right? And the more like we conservative parties, we're more national conservative and national. How can I say this? So the Republican Party currently is more nationalistic, right? Because we American first. But race is not a big factor. However, in Germany, AFD, the race aspect is very strong. The heritage of the German people. I think that's a huge distinctive. Although both of them approach immigration very similar, I don't think the right wing party of the United States, for example, they're not. How can I say? I know some of you guys want to deport a lot of the AFD, not you guys, but the party want to deport even people from second or third generation back to their own country. I don't think the United States is like that.
most of them are going to go up in the AFD. Right-wing populists on the issues, America First agenda, on immigration, trade, just like Trump, kind of the Trump wing
Yeah.
parliamentary faction, if you will. So AFD is going to be a good fit for him. Mike Pence. Now, Pence is a difficult one. Now, Pence, of course, is Donald Trump's vice president, so you could easily make the argument that he would go in the AFD.
No,
However,
he's more
when it comes to actual
nah.
policy, he's a lot different than Trump. Maybe not a lot different, but enough that
No, he's very
I
different.
would actually
Yeah, I will put him right there in the second
put
one.
him
Yeah.
in the CDU. I mean, his identity in the past maybe would tie him to the AFD, but now that he's kind of running his own campaign, he's running for president by himself, kind of distanced himself from Trump. I'd say put him in the CDU to be safe. Elizabeth Warren's going to go in the Greens. I mean, she fought with Bernie
Really?
Sanders, which is actually very
Yeah, I was gonna
makes sense
say.
because the Greens and Die Linke in Germany, have fought before, even though they're allies to some level. And Elizabeth Warren is much like Beto O'Rourke, focused on issues like abortion, very progressive, focused on social and cultural issues as opposed to economic issues. And that's a good fit for her, for the Greens. Also, kind of the electorate up there is a more middle class, liberal in Massachusetts. And so that's going to be a good fit. And Gavin Newsom also going to go in the Greens. California, very liberal, progressive state. And I think Newsom fits this kind of more new generation of Democrats that would go along with the Greens. Of course, California is also pioneering the country in a lot of the kind of new green legislation that's taking place in that state. And he's been, of course, the one behind that. And, progressive on social issues. Of course, still, can be left-wing on economics, but they focus on these certain issues that kind of make them stand out. And California is a much more green state, whereas I would say we have next Kathy Hochul of New York would be a good fit for the SPD, whereas New York is a more traditional, like I said, FDR coalition, Democrat state.
FDR, I don't know why he's saying FDR. FDR is way, way more conservative. FDR is what they consider today a traditional conservative. FDR. So I don't know why when he does that emphasis about FDR, I don't know what he's comparing to because Democrats were very physically conservative back then. The progressive acts only started in the late 90s, so that's kind of interesting.
Democrats, the economic question is more important. You have more of a working class, minority and white working class voting bloc that kind of backs these traditional establishment Democrats, and Hochul will be a good fit, along with Cuomo, even though he's not here in the SPD. Now, Greg Abbott, we have kind of the opposite, but same thing, leading a Christian conservative state in the South, Texas, and he's going to be good fit for the CDU, kind of generic establishment Republican. Gretchen Whitmer is going to go
Lincoln.
SPD. I mean, Michigan, kind of similar to New York, has that traditional Democrat profile, working class, out of Detroit being the power base of the party. and she doesn't stand out too left wing or too progressive on any of the issues, and so I think she'd be a good fit for the SPD. Hillary Clinton, this is a more difficult one. You could put her in the FDP with her husband. However,
No, she's a more
times have
liberal.
changed from whenever Bill Clinton ran to when Hillary Clinton ran. And you could also say the Greens, but I think she kind of goes in the SPD.
I think so too.
She is part of the Democratic establishment, and she didn't stand out too much on the issues. She wasn't like Bernie Sanders, very left wing on economic issues. She didn't focus on the progressive issues a lot. She doesn't really. This one's I'm not too sure on. You could argue that she's more liberal than Joe Biden, or more right wing, more of a conservative Democrat than even Biden. But she's also tied to Obama. She was part of the Obama administration. I think for that reason, I'm going to keep her in the SPD, even though you could make the argument for FDP. I think being also in 2016, she did have more of a left wing profile on cultural issues than her husband did. Especially when it comes to abortion and gay marriage. And you could say that it comes down to the times have changed, and that's not really her position. But nonetheless, I think keeping her at SPD is a safe bet. Kristen Sinema is going to go in the FDP, kind of the opposite of Collins. You have a liberal Republican and then more of a conservative Democrat, or a Democrat who's kind of right-wing on economics, and that is the case for Sinema. She's going to be a good fit in the FDP. Joe Manchin, almost the same exact case.
I was going to say,
as Sinema, you have a conservative Democrat. He's very moderate on a lot of the issues. You could even technically make an argument for CDU, because sometimes the FDP is more right-wing on economics. But I think the FDP is a good fit.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. Yeah.
Even though the FDP is a lot more liberal than Joe Manchin would be, and someone coming from a state like West Virginia, overall, I think that's kind of a good fit for him. The FDP is more of the kind of Susan Collins, Sununu, New England type of Republican. The only thing, Manchin being from West Virginia, on cultural issues doesn't really fit with the FDP that well. But I think there's still, even if it's between maybe the CDU and the SPD and FDP.
Yeah, Manchin is one of those guys that I don't even know why he's even a Democrat. It makes no sense. It literally makes no sense.
FDP.
He does not fit at all when it comes down to Democratic Party policy.
Best fit for him. Kamala Harris is going to go SPD. She's part of the Democratic establishment. She doesn't stand out too much. She's kind of there behind Biden, supporting him. And I think, SPD, good fit for her. Kevin McCarthy is going to go CDU. I mean, he is clearly, as, Speaker, the
very established
core part of the Republican establishment.
I don't like him, man.
In Congress.
Kevin McCarthy is one of those politicians that have, I have to say that, they have a slappable face. Oh, man, you see him, it's like, man, why are you even a politician, man? You are Kevin McCarthy is one of those politicians that he's full of it from the get-go. Fake smile, Really.
He's kind of an ally of Trump when he was president, but isn't someone who's ideologically that close to him. And for that reason, I think
more like a Mitt Romney kind of guy.
A great fit. Marjorie Taylor Greene, like I said, most of Freedom Caucus members are going to go in the AFD. Right-wing populist, very loud, notorious candidate or congresswoman. Very loud, very aggressive on the issues. Has that kind of populist flair, the same thing that Trump had, and is kind of portrayed
she needs to calm down,
as this kind of MAGA candidate.
She needs to calm down.
And she was elected in Georgia, which is a state that's somewhat more leaning conservative in terms of, it's a traditional Republican state, even though it's become more 50-50 now. And you have, a lot of people there that are, similar to the CDU, but her on the issues, she is very close to Trump in terms of identity, and that's going to be a good fit for her. Matt Gaetz, same thing, almost identical to Donald Trump on the issues, focuses on immigration, this America First Republican, firebrand kind of a conservatism, and it's going to be, like a lot of Florida Republicans are going to fit in the AFD along with Trump and the congressmen that came around in 2018, 2020 that are allies of him. And in stark contrast, we have Mitch McConnell, which is going to go in the CDU. I mean, he is the definition of the Republican establishment. Been there a long time in the Senate. And he is
such an establishment
generic
guy.
Conservative, political kind of, not bureaucratic, but he's been there a long time. He's part of the establishment, doesn't stand out, so CDU is a good fit for him. Nancy Pelosi is going to go in the SPD. She's from California. You could make in this, I guess she could go in the Greens, but she is, like I said, another part of the Democratic establishment, the core, old guard of the party. Led it in its led it as a minority party in Congress and was Speaker of House for the Democrats several times. So she is going to fit very well in the SPD. Ted Cruz is going to go to the CDU. I mean, Ted Cruz is more right-wing, you could say, than a lot of the Republicans, or maybe
right in the middle. Yep, I would say in the middle.
You could make the argument for AFD. But I would still put him in the CDU because he may be supportive of Trump once Trump kind of came along and became powerful. But in the initial phases, they kind of had some problems with each other. And so for that reason, I think he's still part of the Republican establishment. And in that regard, he would go to the CDU. Paul Gosar, like Gates and Marjorie Taylor Greene, most of the Freedom Caucus members are going to go in the AFD.
Oh, really?
Paul Gosar, very right-wing on the issues.
Okay.
Very controversial figure, and a perfect person for the AFD. He's arguably one of the most right-wing congressmen we have in the U.S.
I don't even know who that guy is.
Parallel to some of the representatives the AFD has in the Bundestag.
Interesting.
Rand Paul.
He's a libertarian.
He can also put his father, Ron Paul, here and kind of use this as the candidate for the Libertarians. Now, the Libertarians, the initial obvious choice would be the FDP. Because the FDP is kind of socially liberal. They're okay with, gay marriage and abortion, things like that, but they're very right-wing on economics. However, the FDP itself is more of a small government to benefit business and corporations. The small business or small government for the benefit of the individuals, you would find with the AFD. And in fact, most libertarians in Germany are found in the AFD. That kind of identity, even though it's only a minority of the AFD, that kind of identity is only really found in that party. And you have, for example, stuff like COVID restrictions. The FDP was a lot more supportive of COVID restrictions than the libertarian would be in the U.S., and the AFD was strongly against that. So I think most of the libertarians, even, initially you might see FDP, I think would go in the AFD. So Hakeem Jeffries is going to go SPD, another kind of Democratic establishment, a part of the congressional Democrats. He's going to be a good fit for
Ron DeSantis,
Democrats, this
AFD.
generic kind of center-left, focuses kind of on the basic issues, on socioeconomic issues, and so, yeah, and then we have Ron DeSantis. DeSantis has, over the past year, had some rivalry, some problems with Trump. However, he is kind of a protege of Donald Trump. I mean, he was elected as governor with the support of Donald Trump. And even though they have some problems now, on the issues, they are very similar. And you could say part of the CDU, but I think it's safe to put him in the AFD.
Yeah, the only thing is the way he conveying himself is just so establishment ball language. He needs to somehow just let it go. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's still like,
I think even though there's kind of a fight between them now because they're both running against each other for president, on the issues, they really are.
Huge mistake.
They both, would find a home in the AFD. Lindsey Graham is, perfect example of the CDU. I mean, Lindsey Graham is... I could not think of one person to better represent kind of the alliance or the kind of the parallel, because Lindsey Graham, in fact, I don't know if it actually happened, but was planning on meeting with Friedrich Merz, the chairman of the CDU, and he is, Lindsey Graham is Atlanticist, pro-NATO, pro-American, very friendly towards the U.S. allies, very status quo, kind of this almost...
He's a loser. Let me put it that way. He's just a loser politician. What? So wherever the wave move, he move. He has no position. He just,
a neocon, a very
Neocon, yeah.
Bush type of Republican in the Trump era, even though he gets along with Trump well on the issues, very similar to
Very sneaky.
the traditional Republicans, and would get along well with the CDU. So there we have it. We have all these politicians amongst the different German parties. Like I said, it's not going to be perfect. It's not good.
Yeah, it's complicated, folks. It's very complicated. It's not easy. I mean, shout out to the guy. He did a very good job. I agree almost 90% of the way he just put things into perspective. Again, it's because Germany has a different system when it comes down to the parties itself. So it's very hard to, put them all together. But it seems like he's been studying this for quite some time, so that makes sense. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I would love to hear you guys' opinion when it comes down to U.S. politics. Since you guys are in the other side of the world, it's interesting to see what you guys think about this. Meantime, guys, I'll see you in the next one.